libertarianism is a political philosophy that basically holds that people are in the best position to determine the course of their lives, that people should have self-determinism about how they want to live their lives, the choices they want to make, and that it's better for them to have that choice at the individual level than to have it imposed on them from some kind of top-down structure. It's also a repudiation of political violence or coercion of any kind, and believes that any kind of exterior structure like a government or a church or a corporation shouldn't be using force or coercion to try to force people to live in the way that they want them to live. Instead, people should be able to decide how they want to live and live in that way, as long as they're not hurting anybody else or taking their stuff. My interest in libertarianism began about 20 years ago when I was in university. I took a philosophy class, and it was less of a process of becoming a libertarian. It was more of a discovery that I already held those values, and I was surprised to learn that other people in my class did not hold the same values. Things that seemed obvious to me, like you shouldn't coerce people to do things that you want them to do, that seemed fairly obvious to me. It didn't seem as obvious to other people around me, and I was surprised to find that. And I discovered that philosophy had a name, and it was called libertarianism, and I've been on that road ever since. I do identify as pagan. I think it's the form of spirituality or religion or whatever you want to call it that best represents what I believe or what I think. I don't know that believe is such a strong word. It's hard to even know. But I wouldn't say I follow a particular spiritual tradition. It's a little bit more eclectic. The organization that I belong to, called the Firefly House, broadly follows a Wiccan ritual structure, but we're very eclectic, and we have druids and we have pantheists and we have all sorts of people. And so I would probably describe myself as a pantheist more than anything else. And I'm interested in all aspects of paganism and all the different traditions. But I first became interested in it through a study of ritual magic, through like Golden Dawn style ceremonial magic. And that's what I discovered first through a book by John Michael Greer. I discovered that in around 2007. And I've been reading furiously about it ever since. But I really only became involved in the community and started that self-identifying as a pagan about 4 or 5 years ago, when I really started talking to other people who held the same views. And so that's where I am now. The Firefly House is a Washington, D.C. based organization that calls itself a pan-pagan organization, meaning it covers all aspects of paganism and all the different traditions. It has a very diverse membership. We have some Satru and heathens. We have some druids. We have some Wiccans. We have some unaffiliated people, pantheists more like myself. And we get together many times a year and set up public-facing rituals for the Sabbats that the Wiccan calendar traditionally observes. We sometimes do Esbat rituals too for full moons and new moons. And we have a lot of educational content and private classes and private gatherings where we try to explore the faith and read about it and talk about it and share each other's experiences. We do a lot of tarot reading. And basically, it's just a place for people in the Washington, D.C. area, throughout Southern Maryland and Northern Virginia as well, to come together and find like-minded people and hang out and have a good time. We're very relaxed. We're very non-judgmental. We're very non-dogmatic, and welcome everybody. My role in the organization is as an initiate. It's a very non-hierarchical organization, I would say. There's a very, very loose hierarchy in that there's initiates and non-initiates who are in. The initiates are basically volunteers who have gone through a certain amount of training and a certain amount of preparation and help organize the events and help put things together. So I am one of the people who helps put together the public rituals and write things and hold classes and all that sort of thing. My writing regime is not too rigid most of the year. It really depends on what project I'm working on and how enthusiastic I am about it. Right now, as I record this, it is November, which is National Novel Writing Month in the United States. And every November for the last 14 years, I've attempted to write a novel in that month. And right now, I'm working pretty rigidly on that. And I have to spend 2 to 3 hours a day writing about 2,000 words a day to try to keep up with my pace that I've set for myself in that goal. So I have a much more structured writing routine right now. And I like to pour a cup of tea and sit down and maybe light a candle and just have a relaxing period where I can focus and get that done. On other times of the year when I'm not so focused on a deadline or trying to complete something, If I have an idea that I'm working on, I'll often just get up in the morning and do an hour or two of writing, and maybe sprinkle it out throughout the day. For the last book I wrote, I found a little coffee shop that was nearby, and I would go there every morning and drink a cup of coffee and eat a bagel and write my novel, or my book wasn't a novel, out there, and that was really nice. So occasionally I'll find an exterior space outside of my home to do it, but mostly I write in my home. I work from home as well for my day job, and so it's a convenient location that I have set up just to do all my writing and get all my work done from the same place. Conform or Be Cast Out is my last book for Moon Books, and it's about nonconformity, essentially. There are lots of books and studies out there about how nonconformists have a hard time of it and are not very well accepted by society. But a pattern that I noticed and I thought was interesting, and I hadn't seen anyone else really explore, is the idea that nonconformists are often identified with some kind of metaphysical evil. It's not enough to say this person is behaving wrong, or we dislike them, or they're bad. There's some kind of association with demons or devil worship or something like that. And I found this throughout history in a lot of different fields, and I thought it was interesting, and I hadn't seen anyone else make that connection. So the subtitle of my book is The Literal Demonization of Nonconformists. And what I try to do is figure out where those ideas came from and trace them throughout history. You can see it, particularly obvious examples are things like the Inquisition and the Salem witch trials, where people were tortured and killed for behaving in a nonconforming way and called witches and called devil worshippers and all those things. But you see it in much more subtle ways, and it continues on to this day. Another big section in the book is about the Satanic Panic in the 1970s and 1980s, when there was all this hysteria about things like heavy metal music or role-playing games, where people were behaving in a way that hadn't been seen before, but was harmless. But because it was different, because people felt threatened by it, they had to try to demonize these people and say, well, they must be instruments of evil if they're doing these things. And there were a lot of lives ruined in the Satanic Panic. There was a lot of false allegations of satanic ritual worship that hurt a lot of people who were completely innocent. So it's a dangerous pattern, and it's something we've seen for thousands of years, really. And I wanted to draw attention to it and point out that this is a really scary thing, that we're taking someone who's living their lives peacefully, not bothering anybody else, but living their life in a different way than maybe what you think they should be doing. And instead of leaving them alone and letting them be, we have to say that they are somehow, morally evil or identified with demonic powers of some sort. And that leads to very dangerous and very deadly consequences. So that's the basic thesis of the book. And I trace it throughout a number of different areas and through a number of different lenses throughout history. There are many writers that I admire greatly. I think the one I will choose for this answer is Victor Hugo. He is my favorite novelist. He's one of the first writers I read growing up who really made me feel something emotionally, who really connected with me emotionally. And he writes such big, glorious, larger-than-life stories dealing with big questions of, morality and loyalty and values. And they're just epic, and they're fantastic novels. And I think very few people read them these days. People know about the Les Miserables musical, obviously, but apart from that, and the Disney version of Hunchback of Notre Dame, which remains completely mysterious to me why they would choose to adapt that. But his novels are just so beautiful and so touching and so gorgeous, and the characters are so great, and it deals with such timeless and evocative themes that he's someone that I always go back to and think all of his books, every single one of his books, are just monumentally great. And it's the double-edged sword of having a literary hero, in that it inspires you in some sense to think, I want to write like that. I want to create those kind of stories. But on the other hand, it can be very discouraging, because I'm never going to achieve anything close to what Victor Hugo achieved, no matter how hard I try. So that can be a problem as well. The other person I'd like to mention is J.R.R. Tolkien, who has been a huge influence on my life as well. One of my favorite writers. And I've read The Lord of the Rings. I think I'm on my 8th reading at the moment. Keep going back through it over and over again. Just the depth of his world building, his attention to detail, his, again, great characters that are really memorable and very relatable, and some people that you empathize with and you feel connected to just through reading the book. That kind of connection that you can create between an author and a reader is so special and so hard to do, that I really admire people who can achieve that. may sound a little bit shallow to say it, but to me, like having the physical book that you've written in your hand, published by a real publisher, it was the most exciting thing I've ever experienced in my life. I am a big advocate of physical media. I think it matters I always read all my books in hardback or paperback form. I don't have a Kindle or anything like that. And I think having the physical object is so meaningful. And the first time I saw something that I'd written be created as a physical object that will exist in the world for as long as it endures, until it degrades through time and use, to me, that's really exciting and really important. And like the fact that I've created something that will last and that people can discover after I'm dead, people can discover generations from now. I feel like I've, in some sense, made an impact on the world, no matter how small it may be. And I don't get the same feeling from writing something that gets published on the web, for example, or from creating any kind of digital art or music or anything like that. I think having that physical project is really important. And that's something that I found just thrilling the first time it happened. And it never ceases to thrill. That's one of the coolest things. The other cool thing about being a writer is just the ability to create stories and to, have that outlet for your imagination. And when you have an idea and you can put it down on paper and you can create something that didn't exist before. And I find that is really thrilling too, because it's a good outlet for the imagination that most people who aren't writers just don't have. So I love being a writer. It's what I would choose to do if I could do anything in the world. I think it's fantastic. Well, as I mentioned, it's currently National Novel Writing Month in the United States, which means I'm writing a novel, which I've done every year for the past 14 years. The current novel I'm working on is a dark fantasy novel for young adults, which is about basically it's sort of about the connection between music and the supernatural. And this is going to link to another project I'm going to mention in a minute. It's about a young boy who lives in kind of vague Scandinavia-ish region, and has some interactions with supernatural beings called trolls, which you will be familiar with, and his connection with the trolls and the music that the trolls make and the music that he makes and how they link together. So that's what I'm working on right now. I hope to have a draft of it done by the end of November. And I always love writing novels. They're great. But I also write nonfiction books, and the books I published through Moon Publishing have been nonfiction books. I'm not currently working on a new one at the moment, but I have an idea for one that I want to do in the future, which is again about music. I want to do a book about the way that music is used in rituals, the way that music can be used to alter consciousness and to create that kind of that sacred space or that ecstasy. I think that's a really interesting topic, and it's something that I am particularly interested in because I love music. I'm a musician myself. I have a huge collection of music, and I like very unusual music. And a lot of the music I listen to is very useful for kind of getting into that altered consciousness that is useful for if you want to do ritual work or work magic or meditate or anything like that. So that's something I want to explore in the future. I'm hoping to work on a book about that, but I still have a lot more research to do before I can really properly start it. I've thought about this question a lot, and I think I'm such a music nerd that I think I would want to see a great performance of someone who's no longer living and who I never got a chance to see. I've thought about lots of bands that I love that I'd love to see in their prime. It'd be amazing to see like Queen at Live Aid or something, for example. But I think the one that I would choose if I could pick one is my favorite composer is the pianist Franz Liszt, who is like completely revolutionized the instrument and is just known for his extravagant performances that were unlike anything anyone had ever seen at the time. So if I could go back into the late 19th century, mid 19th century and see a performance by Franz Liszt at the height of his powers, I think that's the thing I would choose. It may sound a little bit, less important than going back to witnessing world history, but I think it would be satisfying on an emotional level in a way that seeing a major historical event wouldn't be for me, because I love music so much, and an extraordinary performance can just be transformative. Okay, this is a difficult one because there's lots of people I admire, and most of them are not American, but there's a few that I would pick. I would first of all say I'll pick the director David Lynch, who is living, one of the only people I'm inviting who's living. He is one of my favorite directors. He's just an all-around fascinating person. He's so different from anybody else that I know of. He's enigmatic, he's creative, he's funny. I think it would be great to have him on. I love all of his films, and I love watching interviews with him because he's always unexpected and great. This kind of goes back to my theme of my Conform or Be Cast Out book, is I like weirdos. I like nonconformists. I like people who live in a different way than other people. And David Lynch certainly qualifies. So he would be my first booking. My second booking, I think I would pick Vincent Price. because I'm a horror movie junkie, absolutely love horror movies, and Vincent Price is one of my favorite horror movie actors. But he's not just an actor, because actors can be a little bit dull and self-centered. But everything I've seen about Vincent Price tells me that he was a complete Renaissance man, cultured, genteel, very witty, very funny. He had many different varied interests. He was a chef. He was an art collector as well as an actor. I think he would be delightful to have at the table. And then my third pick would be someone that most people may not be familiar with, my favorite songwriter of all time. His name is Jim Steinman. He died 2 years ago. He's known for writing all the hits of Meatloaf, the entire Bat Out of Hell album and sequels. And he also wrote Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler and many, many other hits that you'll be familiar with. He's my favorite songwriter. I think his music is so passionate and so emotional and just so beautiful. And he's again, a real eccentric, a real non-conforming type of person. Very, very witty, very funny. And I think he would be a delight. I never got the chance to meet him in life. Unfortunately, I tried a couple of times, but it just didn't work out. So I regret that missed opportunity. So if I could bring Jim Steinman back and have him at my dinner party, I think that would be just excellent. Those are the three people that I would choose. My top tip for an aspiring writer is that writing is work like any other. A lot of people think that with art, you have to wait to be inspired and you have to wait for the inspiration to come before you can create anything. Writing is about putting in the hours, putting in the work, sit down and write, even if you're not happy with what you're doing. The more you write, the better you'll get. So just put in the hours.